When we look at Sefer Vayikra, you can't yawn yet. I didn't start. You can yawn in a minute. When we look at Sefer Vayikra, it's very challenging. Meaning, we started with a narrative in Bereshit. We went through the narrative in Bereshit, more or less Keseda. There are a few sugyas, Shemot, the same thing. We get to narrative in Sefer Vayikra, and honestly, the narrative we take up at the beginning of this week's parsha is from the beginning of Parshat Shmini. In the meantime, we had Kashrut, Tazria and Metzora, and now we go back to Acharei Mot, Bnei Aharon. And it really belongs, this parsha really belongs totally juxtaposed to the death of Nadav and Avihu, Acharei Mot Shnei Bnei Aharon, right? That's where the parsha is. But instead we didn't. We had, and I'm not giving shiur on that, but we had a whole perek on kashrut, and call out for fish, and we had, and then we had Tazria Metzora, which is extremely challenging if you made your way through the parsha of trying to understand the halachot of Metzora, and Tum and Tahara right in the middle there. Now we've gone back to Acharei Mot Shnei Bnei Aharon, and the subject I want to approach today, never done before, never touched it before, as it happens, is Avodat Yom Kippurim. I've never touched it before in a Shiur Klali. I've touched it before on Yom Kippur, or Erev Yom Kippur, or in the lead up to Yom Kippur. But what we have at the beginning of our parsha is a hora'ah of how to go into the Kodesh, how to enter the Kodesh. It's actually a direct instruction to Aaron and anyone who will succeed Aaron as being a Kohen Gadol, of how you are meant to enter the Kodesh HaKodashim. And in fact, we are only talking about one day in the year, Yom Kippur. And what we have in the first part of our parasha is a very, very clear description. I think very, very clear. There is a question here that we could, it's a different shiur, but it's interesting. We have the avodah of Yom Kippurim. That's what's in the beginning of Acharei Mot. Again, you need Torah Sheba'al Peh here because there's the Seder is different in Torah Sheba'al Peh to Torah Shebichtav. Again, a very complex and different shiur, but it works out in the end that the Kohen Gadol changes his clothes 5 times. You won't see that in the Psukim. In the Psukim, you'll see 3 times. You need Torah Sheba'al Peh to understand how the avodah takes place, to be able to understand Marei Kohen and that whole malach. I wanted to settle on something specific to do with the avodah of Yom Kippurim. The Seder, which if you remember when we were davening in here on Yom Kippur, and MTA you will please go daven in here on Yom Kippur, and the Seder is essentially that the first of all the Kohen has to get atonement for himself, then he gets atonement for all of the Kohanim, and then he gets atonement for all of Am Yisrael. So if you remember, we actually bow down 4 times in Musaf of Yom Kippur. The first time is Aleinu L'Shabeach. It's not really kashor to the Avodah. It's just about where we actually go down, right? And the next 3 times, the first time is representative of the Kohen Gadol's personal kapara, then the Bnei Aharon's personal kapara, and then the kapara of Am Yisrael. Now, what I want to home in on specifically here, and it might look to be very technical to you, but I think it is remarkably interesting, fascinating to the degree that it's something I've mamish never done before. And I put together 2 essays here, one by Rabbi Sachs and one by Rav Soloveitchik. There are essentially 2 korbanot that come together. And in the words of the pasuk, echad laHashem ve'echad laAzazel. One is offered up to God, and the other is sent to Azazel. I want to discuss this Azazel, what this is, that there are 2 korbanot. It's very, very strange that one is laHashem. Normally there would be 1 korban, right? If I've sinned to a certain capacity, not every sin, but a specific capacity, I would bring a chatat. I would bring a sin offering. Okay, there are ashamot as well, but I would bring a sin offering. An olah is a burnt offering, normally for not fulfilling potential, but not for negative commandments. It's a much more positive korban. But I would normally bring a chatat and I'm finished. I bring a chatat, I bring a sin offering, and it's done. But suddenly on Yom Kippur, I'm bringing 2 korbanot. One I'm going to offer up. The Kohen Gadol is going to offer up in the Beit Mikdash, and the other is going to be schlepped by someone to the midbar and thrown off a cliff. Now it's more than that, and you start to understand the mashmot of Yom Kippur. That they put a red cloth in between the horns of this goat that was being thrown off the cliff, and it would turn white if we were atoned for. And there would be a parallel piece of cloth in the Beit Mikdash that would also turn white, and that's why there's this uproar of Marei Kohen, of Simcha at the end of Yom Kippur, because you're getting this public message from HaKadosh Baruch Hu that you've been forgiven. We don't get that on Yom Kippur, right? We finish with a positive note and we dance and we hope that everything's going to be good, but it's an incredible feeling at the end of Yom Kippur if you actually have a heavenly sign that it's going to be a good year for Am Yisrael. And that would explain without any kind of kvetching why there is Simcha on Sukkot. That would have a direct effect on Sukkot. If you get a direct telegram from HaKadosh Baruch Hu that it's going to be a good year, then there's reason for people to be dancing in the streets. You've got it from the authority of the world, the greatest authority, King of Kings, and it's going to be a good year. There's a reason to celebrate. And that was a process. Of course, mentioning as one has to, what would happen if the cloth doesn't turn from red to white? That would be a pretty sad Sukkot. Rav Meidan, one of the Rashi Yeshiva in the Gush, says that Chazon Yeshayahu, when Yeshayahu wrote that first chapter of his, which is a very negative chapter, it was after an Avodah on Yom Kippur that failed. That would really dampen Sukkot, right? If the cloth stayed red, and you had a message from heaven that it's going to be bad. I remember, the 7th of October, just a couple of weeks after Yom Kippur, I felt almost personally guilty that I did something wrong in Musaf. That such terrible things can happen 2 weeks after Yom Kippur. Wow, such a disaster, so close to Yom Kippur. And so the effect would be different. So I want to discuss those two. And Rav Sachs has the most phenomenal idea. The minute I was learning the Rav Sachs, it reminded me of an essay by Rav Soloveitchik, which is in Al HaTshuva. Okay, Al HaTshuva. Okay, so the Rav Sachs's book, I think, is actually an English book, but I use Hebrew here. And let me go through it with you. I'm not going to do the whole thing with you. I'll do what time allows us to do. Okay? היסוד המוזר ביותר והדרמטי ביותר בעבודת יום הכיפורים המפורטת בפרשת אחרי מות היה טקס שני שעירי העזים. One of the strange, most unique, it really is, again, things when you take a step back and you think you've learned it all your life, so you're used to it. But if you stop and think about it, in the context of Jewish ceremony, it's unique. These two Seirim, these two hikos that we take on Yom Kippur, one LaHashem, one to be offered up, and one to be thrown off a cliff. Hashnaim hayu tzemed l'chol davar v'inyan. With Torah Shabbat Peh adds for us, and it tells us that they were equal. They had to look the same. They had to be very similar. הקפידו לבחור שעירים דומים ככל שאפשר זה לזה בגודלם ובחזותם. They had to look similar, they had to be the same size. There's a whole Torah Shabbat Peh on how they have to look. הם הובאו לפני הכהן הגדול. They are brought before the high priest. והוא הטיל עליהם גורל אחד להשם וגורל אחד לעזאזל. He picks lots. One is going to be offered up to God, one is going to be thrown off the cliff. Okay? השעיר שהוגדל להשם הוא עלה לקורבן חטאת. The seir that is defined as being God's korban, you have to do the technical stuff or you won't understand the theme. Okay, the seir that's going to be offered up to God is a chatat. It's a regular sin offering. We have sin offerings all the time. Okay, al haseir achai. But what does he do with the one that isn't going to be offered up, the one that's going to be thrown off a cliff? Samach HaKohen et yadav v'hitvada al chataei b'nei Yisrael. He puts his hands on the korban and he confesses the sins of Am Yisrael. Va'az nilkach haseir lemidbar v'shulach sham. Then this seir is sent to the midbar. It's a long way. Very, very interesting concepts come up in the Mishnah here. Number one, the person who was walking all of this way was allowed to break his fast, but he never ever did. To which the Gemara invokes a law, Misheb Yeshlo Pat B'Salo, someone who has bread in his basket never gets hungry, meaning you know that too. When the fast is going out, when the fast is out and you're allowed to eat, you're not really that hungry anymore. The hunger comes from not being allowed to eat. So the man who used to schlep the korban out to the Azazel, he never ever broke his fast, even though he was allowed to break his fast. Like we said, on the horns of this seir was a scarlet cloth. The other half was left in the mikdash. And if there is kapara, if we're atoned for, if our sins are forgiven, the red will turn to white. And this is a fulfillment of the pasuk. We totally don't understand this. This seems pagan. To be taking a seir into the wilderness and throwing it off a cliff, it seems it's not something that we do in Judaism. It's not part of Reshit Ma'oto Azazel. What is Azazel? What is this place? That he is sent to. Seir la'azazel, that is what it's called. Shem ze eino mofir od b'mikra. It doesn't come up anywhere else in Tanakh, only in this place. Shalosh hatzaot ikariot. He's going to give 3. I'm only going to do 2 because the middle one is confusing, it's complex, and it's going to take us to a dead end. Okay, so let's just do the first and the third. Al pi divrei Chazal shirashi metzatet zeu har ez v'kasher suk gavoa. Azazel is a high and tough mountain. To the degree that you throw this seir off the mountain, it will be dead within seconds. It will hit rocks, it will die straight away. Kolomar ha'azazel hu makom. It's a place. The Azazel is a place. Ota eretz gezerah. This is what Rashi says. She'aseir nishlach elea. It's a certain place just outside of Jerusalem. Remember, Jerusalem is the old city. Everywhere outside of Jerusalem is just mountains of Judea and nothing else. Okay, the real Jerusalem is the old city of Jerusalem. Anything outside of the walls isn't Jerusalem. It's called Jerusalem Rabbati, but Jerusalem is the old city of Jerusalem. He would be thrown out to die. Number 1. Skip Perush Hasheni and go down to the second paragraph from the bottom, HaPerush Hashlishi. If you have time later on in the week, I'm happy to explain to you, but it's Ibn Ezra. It's very, very difficult and very complex and not quite sure how I understand it. It's Ibn Ezra and Ramban, actually. The Perush Shlishi is the easiest of all, and this is very interesting for your general knowledge, by the way. Follow it through. Azazel hu helchem milah hamurkevet mishtaim eiz azal is actually a combination of 2 words, a goat that is being used to get out. A goat to get out would be a scapegoat. This is the origin of the phrase scapegoat. In fact, the original phrase was escapegoat. So have a look inside. The original phrase was a scapegoat, which has been shortened to scapegoat. And I suppose in America it will be called an SG. Kolomar, we're getting rid of our sins with the goat. We're getting rid of our sins with the goat. Perush zeh hovil bein hayete loholadata shel milah anglit chadasha. We're getting rid of the goat, and this led to a new English word. Bishnat 1530, in the year 1530, Pirsem William Tyndale wrote a translation of the Bible. He translated it to English. He broke the law doing that and was killed for it, by the way. But he translated the Bible. It was illegal, and he died for it. He died for this translation. A scapegoat. So for the translation, we're going to deal with this explanation. The translation of the word there, Azazel, was a scapegoat. We'll explain in a minute. We use the goat to escape. We'll see what that means. We send this goat away. You have to concentrate. We send this, girls, you don't have to stay. But standing here and seeing people messing around doesn't work. So you send your sins away with the goat. You escape from your reality. Bechiluf ha'itim, as time passed, so nashla ha'ot harishona. So the first letter drops. V'nolda hamilah ha'anglit hamukeret kiyom le'seir la'azazel, scapegoat. And the new word came into being, a scapegoat. So what is this scapegoat? What is the notion that I'm sending a goat away to escape? So he explains, נפרש עזאזל כך או נפרש אחרת. השאלה הגדולה היא מה הייתה בעצם משמעותו של הטקס. What is the meaning of this ceremony? What he does here is remarkable. הוא היה מיוחד במינו, it was very, very unique. קורבנות חטאת ואשם מוכרים היטב. We know about the sin offerings, the guilt offerings. We've learned the introductions to Sefer Vayikra. והם חלק שגרתי מעבודת המקדש. And this is part of the routine עבודה in the Beit Mikdash. אך ביום הכיפורים, on the עבודה of Yom Kippur over the page, מתקיים בחטאת, we have in the חטאת שוני בולט, a very, very extraordinary difference. בכל יתר המקרים הווידוי על חטא נעשה על בהמה מוקרבת. Generally, we confess on the animal that's going to be sacrificed, and finito, the thing is finished. ביום כיפור הכהן הגדול התוודע על חטאי העם כשהוא סומך ידיו על הבהמה שלא תוקרב. He does his vidui on the animal that's going to be sent out into the wilderness. על שעיר העזאזל שיכלך על ארץ גזירה, ונשא השעיר עליו את כל עוונותיו. And כעיקרון, the idea is that this Seir is going to take all our sins and disappear with all of our sins. את תשובה הפשוטה ביותר, המשכנע ביותר, נתן הרמב"ם במורה נבוכים. The Rambam explains in מורה נבוכים, איש לא יטיל ספק, no one should have a doubt, שאין החטאים גופים המוברים על גבו של פרט אל פרט אחר. There's no way that you can remove sin by passing them on to someone else. There is a quality to a sin. There is damage control when a sin is done. You can't simply say, I am passing my sin, like we do with tashlich, onto a piece of bread and throwing it into the water, and I've got rid of my sins, and now I'm pure. If you really think that works, says the Rambam, you've got to be crazy. You can't pass your sins over to something else. משלים לשם ההיווצרות צורה בנפש כדי שתיווצר ההיפעלות לתשובה. The only point of this is to create a reality, a conscious reality in our minds that will maybe trigger a process of teshuvah. But you shouldn't be fooled to think that just some kind of ceremonial act can relieve you of misdemeanors that you've done in your life. Kapara te'una tekes. Atonement requires a ceremony. Yitzug dramati shel hasarat hachet u'mechikat ha'avar. What we want to create in this ceremony is a removal of sin and rubbing out of the past. One of the most difficult challenges I've certainly had in my life, and I'm sure there are girls in this room who've experienced this as well, not everyone, but if something bad has happened in your life, or if you've done something bad in your life, the way information is passed from one person to the other, you cannot shake it off. It follows you everywhere. It keeps coming up, and you don't ever get a chance to start anew. And you might have made one mistake once in your life, but because it just follows you everywhere, and people just keep bringing it up, and you never get a break. You never get a break. I have a policy in the Midrashah which I've stuck to for 30 years. The minute we take a girl in this Midrashah, I do not share any information with my staff. If there were special circumstances and we made an exception, there is no one on my staff who knows about it except for Dr. Yocheved and Rav Sussman. And the minute the girl walks through the door, it's finished. The girl has to be able to come here. And by the way, I look around the room, I have no idea who was waitlisted, who wasn't. I got no idea. The minute the girl walks through the door, she starts anew. She doesn't schlep her past with her. If you have to schlep your past with you, you cannot do anything in life. You limp through life. And it's a problem now. You ever meet people with a police record? They can't get a job forever. Because wherever they go for a job, they get this police record comes up. It must be something when they did when they were 17. Just an act without thinking, and it's never forgotten. And people always remind them about it, and they can never ever start again. So it's a very important part of the ceremony. My Rebbe always used to say to me, my first Rebbe said to me, "Bereshit bara Elokim isn't the God created the world; it's a God created beginnings. He allows people to start again." And by the end of my school year, on every single school year, my machbarot, my textbook, my written books were full of simis, very pause, red lines, riding through. I didn't do any work, and my my uniform was full of holes, and first day of school was like it was only the first day. I used to chozer atzmi kol shana, but the first day of school I had a brand new uniform, I had new books, I was determined I had the impetus to do something new. But if you schlep the stuff from the year before, you got no chance, right? You got no chance. And the chance to do things from the beginning, mechikat hachet, to get rid of the chet, is incredibly important part of the ceremony. So we understand we have the chatat. Understand when you bring a chatat, the fact that I bring a korban doesn't mean I'm forgiven. If it doesn't come together with intention, it doesn't come together with feeling, and understand as well that to bring a korban, you have to come all the way to Yerushalayim. It's a big thing. And when you come to Yerushalayim, as I mentioned to, I can't remember who I was talking to about it. I don't know when it came up in Shiur, but we were talking about atmosphere. We talk about place, and I asked. I think I just come back from America. I asked someone the question: why does someone go to Manhattan? Why would anyone go to Manhattan? Sorry, Manhattan people, Evie and co. Why would someone go and live in Manhattan? Why go visit Manhattan? Not to daven, right? You go to Manhattan because you want to see the lights. I saw a lot of people looking at lights at Times Square. I didn't quite understand what they were looking at, so I went to Barnes & Nobles and read books. I passed Central Park on the way. I had a little walk in the park, and then I told my wife, meet me in Barnes & Nobles. That's why they go. Or they go for a meal, they go for a show, right? They go for a show on Broadway. That's why you'll go. Why do people come to the Rova? Why does anyone come to the Rova? You don't come for a show in the Rova. You don't come for the juice. So why do you come to the Rova? You come to daven. The only reason people come to Yerushalayim, to the Ir Atikah, is to daven. The people, the masses you saw here on Sukkot, if you were here on Sukkot, are people who are coming here to daven. There's a process. You bring a korban to Yerushalayim. You're going through a process. You're coming, and you have to be tahor, and you have to make sure you're tahor, and you're coming here only to have this religious experience. The city is full of Kohanim, and it's a religious experience. It's the Rambam. It's clear, right, that when you bring a chatat, it's not about me killing an animal and then I'm free. There has to be a process there. But why is there a difference on Yom Kippur? Why do we have an extra korban, which we're going to send out to the mountain and throw it off the top? Madua ein dai b'seir rishon. Why isn't it not enough to have a chatat? One chatat, like everyone else brings one chatat. Why not have one chatat? Hatshuva ne'utza b'ma'ato ha'kfula shel Yom Kippur. And this is where I want to go. Okay, so bear with me. This is where I want to go. He says the answer is in the mahut, in the quality, in the definition of what Yom Kippur is. HaTorah omeret. Now look at the words carefully in the psukim. V'ayta lachem lechukat olam. This should be for you as a statute forever. B'chodesh hashvi, in the 7th month. Be'esol hachodesh, in the 7th. On the 10th of the 7th month, ta'anu et nafshotechem, you should afflict your souls. V'chol melacha lo tasu, you can't work. Ha'ezrach v'ageh hagar b'tochechem. Ki b'yom hazeh yechaper alechem. You won't remember, but I stressed this during the avodah on Yom Kippur very much. Every time I said this pasuk, we said it a few times. Ki b'yom hazeh yechaper alechem. This day will atone for you. Letaher etchem. To purify you. We've introduced a new word. There's kapara, there's atonement, and there's tahara, there's purification. Lechaper, letaher. Shnei talechim nivdelim lemadai mitkaimim b'yom kippur. So here Rabbi Sachs says there are two very, very different ceremonies taking place, procedures taking place. Yeshna kapara, there is atonement. Zehu tafkido haragil shel korban chatat. That's what a chatat does. It atones. We have to discuss what atonement is. It atones. Avayeshna gam tahara, but there's also purification. Kapara and tahara. There is atonement and there is purification. Hatara naset b'derech klal behekshesh shoneh legamri. Hasarat hatuma kugon tumat hamet. How do you metaher yourself normally? You remove the tuma. You go to the mikveh. You have efer apara. Whatever it is, you remove the tuma. Tuma mimachalot, or either from sarat or tuma keri or other tumot that you will have. Kapara inyana ashma. Kapara is about guilt. Tahara is about purification. Tahara inyana zihum. When you are mataher something, you're mataher an infection. It's as if you're infected and you need to get rid of the infection. Next paragraph. He mentioned it in Metzora. I didn't see what he wrote there. There are two issues there. This is fascinating. It really is fascinating. Two areas in the world that the world deals with when it comes to misdemeanors, doing things that are wrong. There is the strength of shame. Shame. Ruth Benedict, the anthropologim nosafim, there's a writer, Ruth Benedict, she writes, Hivchinu ben tarbuyot shel busha letarbuyot shel ashma. Two words, the culture of shame and the culture of guilt. Shame and guilt. In his essay, when he discusses that, he discusses the way the American army did not understand the Vietnamese and the Japanese during their wars. They didn't understand the Indian of Busha. They didn't understand the shame that it was for a Japanese soldier to surrender. And when they did understand it, they decided to drop a nuclear weapon on them because they would never surrender, because the culture of shame in Japan was a definitive culture. And you had to die before surrendering. It was better to die than surrender. And in Western culture, that doesn't exist. People can surrender. You become a prisoner of war, okay. They never understood the Japanese will never surrender. They'll never surrender. And when they did understand, they decided to drop a bomb on them, because otherwise it will go on forever. The war will go on forever, right or wrong, different discussion. Habusha, now see his diuk here. Busha, shame, is tofa'ah chevratit. It's a social phenomenon. The shame we feel is when other people see. We don't feel shame when other people don't see. The main purpose of shame is in front of people. We are shamed. They call it in Hebrew now, they call it shaming. You know, if you have a man who won't give a get to a woman, I've seen it in Stern College many times. They put a poster up all through the Jewish community, this man will not give a get. And they shame him, and they shame him until he can't show his face anywhere, and then he'll give a get. Or they freeze his assets, whatever, but that's called shaming, right? You shame someone publicly. But it's a public phenomenon. It's done in public when you shame someone. We feel shame when our failure is exposed in front of other people. Now, when people stand up, you don't do it. You know, when you're shamed in front of someone, then you feel ashamed because other people can see your predicament. We sometimes feel the embarrassment when we imagine that other people are about to discover what we've done. I don't know whether you've ever had that experience, or I'm just a weird person, but sometimes you're just sitting on your own and you go red because you're imagining that someone, yeah, I'm just a weird person. Okay, you just go red. Are you a weird person too? So you just go red, right? You imagine this situation. And sometimes I'm thinking about something that happened 25 years ago, and I can be embarrassed by it. But my embarrassment comes from the fact that I'm imagining other people saw it, and wow, that's embarrassing. Okay, the shame comes when other people see you. It's phenomenal what he does here. And when you are ashamed, what is your first instinct? To hide, to run away. I just don't want to be here. You know, you see that when it happens with little kids, and they are the most honest in their reactions, they just run away, right? They run away into a corner, they hide, they run out the room because they're so ashamed, they're so embarrassed. That's what Adam and Chava did in Gan Eden. The minute they became aware of their sin and God wonders, they start hiding. So to the degree that God says, Ayeka, where are you? They discovered their nakedness and they went to hide because they were ashamed. But not of each other, they were ashamed of God. They were ashamed of some external phenomena. What is guilt? Guilt is Tofa'ah ishit. It's very, very personal. It's very internal. It's not really dependent on what other people will say. If they're going to know what I did. My guilt is going on inside of me. My feelings of guilt are going on inside of me. No one knows Well, you know because I've told you several times, but no one knows what I did on October the 7th. My feelings of guilt are because I know. No one knows that I sat at home and I didn't get up and go in the car and go and fight. No one really knows, only people like you who I shared it with. The guilt is enormous, but it's inside of me. It's got nothing to do with other people. It's something that I have to confront with myself. It's got nothing to do with other people. Hashama hi kolo shel hamatzpun. The guilt comes from my conscience. The voice of my consciousness is telling me that what I've done is wrong. I'm talking to myself and I feel guilty. So different, right? The shame is with other people. The guilt is with myself. And you can't hide from guilt. You can't run away from guilt. If you feel guilty, you feel guilty. You can't go. It go with you. It's going to go with you wherever you go because it's part of who you are. So guilt is really part of knowing yourself. Part of recognizing yourself is such a difference. We're dealing with this all the time. How many times this has come up this year? Of me in front of other people and me in front of myself. We dealt with that in courts so much, right? That those two lives that I live, me in front of people, me with myself. Yesh od hevdel, there's just another distinction, says Rabbi Sachs. And generally you should know that Judaism is about guilt. It's not about shame. It's not about shame. Shame is very, very superficial. If I'm worried about what other people think and how other people react, it's about other people. It's not really about me. The guilt is something that's going on inside of me, positive guilt, okay? V'lo tarbut busha. Generally in Judaism, the tarbut, the culture of shame isn't part of Judaism. We're not meant to embarrass people, right? Even when you rebuke someone, you're not meant to rebuke them until they get embarrassed. So Gemara asks, so you're allowed to embarrass them with your rebuke? No, you're not allowed to. You're allowed to give them rebuke. You're meant to give them rebuke, but if you're going to embarrass them, you're not allowed to embarrass them. You're not meant to do that. Habusha smuda la'adam hachashba. The busha, the shame is part of a person who feels that. I feel it. It's my perception of what you see when you see me. Ashma smuda la'maaseh. The guilt is not about what people think. It's about what I did. It's about what I did. It's much truer. Is what I did right or is what I did wrong? So many times over the last 30 years, a girl, less so now because I don't deal with it so much. Dr. Yocheved deals with it. A girl comes into my office, she's done something wrong. And we'll discuss what she's done and whether it's okay. It's normally not okay if we're discussing what she's done wrong. But the question I will always ask, because the girl is always sorry, is are you really sorry or are you sorry that you got caught? We're always sorry that we got caught. That's a shame. That's the embarrassment. But are you really sorry? Because if you're only sorry that you got caught, you're going to do it again sometime. If you're ashamed, as long as the same people aren't there, you'll do it again. But if you have the guilt, if you realize it's wrong, you won't do it again. Most of us, when we're caught, we're upset that we're caught. That's natural, right? And that's the shock when we understand the ramifications of being caught and what could happen because I'm caught. We're shocked, we're upset, just want to get out of the room alive. But it's not real because it's to do with what other people think of you. Other people, for years when I was dealing with this, Yakira used to come up to me. Yakira was in charge of all the girls for many years, and she used to come up to me and she used to say, the girls are really worried that you think this. And I used to get very frustrated. I thought, who cares what I think? I mean, who cares? I not like God phones me and says, I just want your what you think about this girl. Who cares what I think? Or what should you care about? Whether what you're doing is right or wrong. Who cares what I think? What does it matter? I'm nothing. I don't mean anything. What does it matter? You should care whether what you're doing is right or wrong. The busha shouldn't be important. The ashma should be important. The problem is that if you publicize what someone does, that person they need to leave the country. They need to go somewhere else, right? You make something public, what someone's done, they can't live anymore. They can't look you in the face anymore because they know that every time you look at them, you're thinking about what they did. And you are. And so they can't live there anymore. They have to go away. But it's superficial, right? I'm not dealing with the actual bad thing that I did. I'm dealing with what people think. So I'm not hitting the core of the problem, right? I'm taking acamol. I'm not dealing with antibiotics. It's like I have a stain on my clothes that I can't get rid of. Shakespeare, in Lady Macbeth, I'm sure you're remembering this sentence. I didn't remember it. After the murder, he says, "Ma hayadayim ha'ele le'olam lo yu nekiyot." Will these hands never be clean? It's not never. In Shakespeare, it's ner. Ner is never. You drop the V, right? Will ner be clean? I can never be atoned for that. That's what Germans said after the war. We will never ever be re-entered into humanity. We are stained forever. That was their accusation to Adolf Hitler. You have stained us forever. We will always be the prototype of genocide. And they are. If you're going to NYU, just explain the word. They don't really know what it means. But Talbuyot Busha, in the culture of Busha, in the culture of shame, Hachotim notim latzeit legalut. Generally, what do people do? They go to exile. They just exile themselves because that's the only pitaron, is to go elsewhere, to be somewhere else. Oli tabeid. Some people, and he says that's more common, when they can't deal with shame, they commit suicide. They just can't live with it. They just commit suicide. They cannot show themselves anywhere. The best, that's the most complete and definitive form of escape, is to just kill yourself. And some people would do that. Ha'ashma, but guilt, le'umat zot, in comparison, yotzeret havchana b'ra bein ma'aseh havo levein adam she'asa oto. It differentiates between the action and the person. Ladies, you do a bad action, your life isn't over. Despise the sin and not the sinner. That's what it should be, because society complexes the situation, but that's what it should be. If you do an action, deal with the action. But it doesn't define you forever. Hamaseh hayara, it was a bad action. But you are the same person. You can change that. If you affect the guilt, you can. We want to concentrate on the guilt, not the shame. On the guilt. Ekronit shalem, you are still the same person. You have to change things. You have to confront the issue. That's what Ashma is about. Positive guilt, as I mentioned before, is understanding I did something wrong, but understanding that I am me, and the Maaseh is a Maaseh, and I can do a different Maaseh. I can be a different person. When people see me today, people haven't seen me for 40 years, they can't believe I'm the same person. Number one, I look like a shmata, so they don't recognize me, but they can't believe I'm the same person. Because I was once at a simcha in London, and one of the boys from my class saw me there, and I was introduced as Rabbi Milston, come to speak, and he started laughing hysterically. He said, "Rabbi Milston, what, Stink Bomb Milston?" Stink Bomb Milston, itching powder Milston. I had a trick shop in London that I used to go to every 2 weeks to get my stock. And I had to revalue my stock because I kept running out, because I kept using it. So I was Stink Bomb Milston, but I'm not Stink Bomb Milston anymore. I don't have any stink bombs left. I ran out. The Maaseh is a bad Maaseh. It doesn't define the person forever. Ashma efshar lahasir, you can remove guilt. You can't remove shame. Because shame is in the eyes of other people. Guilt is something going on inside of me. Lechaper ala, you can atone for it. You can atone for it through confession, through regret, through accepting for the future. It's going to be different. I'm going to do it differently. I can start anew. I want to tell you, so I have to tell you, whatever, I've so much to tell you. I'm running out of time. Not for the MTA, but for the Northern Hemisphere, I'm running out of time. You're stuck with me for a bit longer. There was a girl in the Midrashah quite a number of years ago, but not as many as 20 years ago. She did nothing all year. Nothing. Gornished, mitgornished. I've never seen anyone do less. Mama, she did nothing. I honestly thought, you could have rented an apartment in New York and saved money for what you did here. She did mamash nothing here. She did klum klum. And that's how she left. About 2 years later, I come into one of the offices of one of the staff, and she's sitting there. She's sitting there like Sarah Schneer with long sleeves, and she's got her hair done like a shaitel, and she's not married. But she's from the girl's from. And I mamash didn't recognize her. She just looked different. Extra material. She looked different. And I'm looking at her and looking at the member of staff, and the name didn't come. And then she said, you don't recognize me, do you? So I said, she didn't say you don't recognize me because there's no such word. She said, you don't recognize me. And I said, no, I don't. She told me her name. And then I obviously kind of gave this quizzical look. She said, 2 months after I left the midrashah, I woke up. It turned around 2 months after. Everything I learned in the midrashah, you thought I wasn't listening, I was listening. She went to a school in Sfat. She's a very, very frum girl. It was 2 years after she left here. So the effect thing, if a person is big enough to be able to move away from mistakes and turn forward, you can always do it. You can always do it. It can be years after, it can be years later. I get letters from girls, on Yom HaShoah, I got letters from girls about Poland who were in Poland with us 15 years ago. That they took them back to Poland, and they were thinking about this and thinking about that. It's quite amazing. A person, it's to do with yourself, and with yourself, it doesn't end until we stop breathing. It never ends. It doesn't end until we stop breathing. There's always a possibility to change it. And a person says it's never too late. A girl once came into me, I've told you this before. She came into my office crying. She didn't leave crying. She came in crying. It had nothing to do with me. I asked her why she was crying. She said to me, this is what she said. It was May. I just realized who Miriam Wolf is. That's what she said in May. She said, I just realized who Miriam Wolf is. And she was devastated, right? Because it was May and she was going home a month later. I said, okay. It took you all year to realize who this lady is, but now you know. Now you've got it. You've got it forever. Now you know. It takes some people longer than other people. It doesn't matter. But as long as you know that there's a difference between your actions and who you are. That your actions are one thing. It doesn't mean you can do whatever actions you want and then ignore it. But you can do different actions. They are not part of who you are. Shame never lets you leave the actions. Shame puts you together with the action forever. Guilt enables you to, okay, I did it, but now I'm going elsewhere. Otherwise, I'd be lost. I'd be lost years ago. Generally, in Judaism, the chatat is about ashma, it's about guilt, it's about introspection, it's about a person looking inwards and understanding what they did was wrong and changing themselves. Kumrumaz b'shemam, hem mechaprim, they atone. But the thing is that Yom Kippur is not just relating to us as individuals. It deals with community sin, communal sin, the sin of Am Yisrael. We stand in front of God as a people. As a people, guilt doesn't work. But shame does work. So what Rabbi Sachs wants to say in his essay is that the purpose of Azazel is shame. You need to add that perspective into Yom Kippur, because Yom Kippur you're dealing with the people. And the people, that element of shame can shock the people into a situation. That element of shame, ladies, after the 7th of October, after what happened here, Yom Kippur, before the 7th of October, when there was fighting with people who tried to make a minyan in Tel Aviv, and the national shame felt by most people, juxtaposed to the shock of October 7th, created a certain unity which, by the way, may not exist politically, but in the army it is total. It is total, the unity in the army. I hear that from all of my children. The people fight together, they do everything together, and it doesn't matter if they're chilonim, if they're datiyim, they are all together. That unity is there. The unity of the people is, you have to deal with the shame there. Yom Kippur nogea b'milim acheret lo ra b'mamad ishi shel hachet. Because Yom Kippur is dealing with hate, so there has to be a regular chatat, the regular guilt, but it's also dealing with the nation, and therefore we have to invoke the yesod of shame. I want to, in the very little time that's left for me, I just want to tell you what Rav Soloveitchik says. It's right at the beginning of Al HaTshuva. Rav Soloveitchik also differentiates between tahara and kapara. And this is also something important. It's a very different idea to the idea of Rav Sachs. He says there is a difference between kapara and atoning, and this is no less important than what Rabbi Sachs says. When I do something wrong, I need to be forgiven. But if I am forgiven, it doesn't end there. Meaning when I do something wrong, it affects me as a person. It damages me as a person. I'll give you a classic personal example. So and it's silly for me to be explaining this to you because you know much more about it, but I discovered in the summer when I dropped water on my computer that it's not the end of the life of the computer because the computer has a hard disk. And the hard disk is very protected. And even if the computer won't turn on again, the computing engineer can come and take the hard disk out and he can put the hard disk into another computer and I haven't lost anything at all, just time and Ogmat Nefesh. But I haven't lost any, the hard disk stays the same. The hard disk stays the same. You know that, right? I'm sure you've had examples like that where you transfer from one computer to another. The hard disk is very well protected in the computer. Every single one of us has a hard disk. That hard disk has every single thing that happens in our life. And it cannot be wiped out. And that's a bit of a problem. Because not everything we did in our life was fantastic. And it doesn't disappear. We have to work very hard to change the hard disk. I can get kapara, I can get forgiven, but it doesn't change the quality of who I am unless I get tahara. Tahara changes the quality of who I am. L'taheret, that's me. So that's one of the problems we never know about when we're little and we're sitting in front of a screen and we're taking in everything on the screen. Now, I'll give you a prime example of a film which is important to watch, Schindler's List. It's a very important film to watch. It's historically closely accurate. But the problem is in the middle of Schindler's List because Mr. Spielberg wants to portray Amon Goeth and Oskar Schindler as promiscuous. There are scenes with nude women and sex scenes. They don't need to be there. It's got nothing to do with the story, but they're there. You're watching the film because you want to know the history, but you see the scenes. So you've got those scenes forever. You can't wipe them out. You've got them forever. So if per chance I happen to go and listen to Freddie Mercury sing in 1981, years before I was born, I've got that in me forever. I can't get rid of that. That's part of my hard disk. I can get kapara because I've changed my life. How do I get tahara? How do I purify myself from acts that I've done? So kapara is a gift from God, and this is a distinction that we make here. Ki hayom hazeh yechaper alehem. The day will atone for me. But you have to l'taher et atzmecha. No one can do that. You have to do that yourself. God can atone for you. The whole day is a day of rachamim, right? It came because of chet ha'egel. God will atone for you. He'll give you another chance. He'll give you a new beginning. But you have to l'taher yourself. And if you don't want to l'taher yourself, you're going to spend your life in repeat mode. You know, like playing a song again and again and again and again. There'll be no new year. There'll be no new month. You'll just be doing the same thing. And that's what the pasuk says. If you go back to the beginning of the daf, it says, "Ki hayom hazeh yechaper aval titharu." You have to purify yourself. And it does connect with what Rabbi Sachs is talking about, right? There is the guilt means looking inside and challenging myself and seeing what I can do. It really isn't about other people. It's about me in front of me and how I am when I am on my own and how I feel about and what am I going to do about it? And the one thing that for those of you who weren't there, and for those of you who were there, I will remind you that I compared the Kotzker Rebbe to the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon was very, very intellectually unparalleled. And some people claim that it created a reality of elitism where if you were able to learn, you're in, and if you can't learn, you're lost. Hasidus comes along and it includes everyone, even people who are illiterate are included within Avodat Hashem. But then the Kotzker Rebbe comes along and he demands emet, he demands truth. And that becomes very elitist. And I asked you the question, I don't know whether you remember, what differentiates the Kotzker Rebbe from the Vilna Gaon? not the Vilna Gaon, the Torah of the Vilna Gaon. The elitism, intellectualism, and the elitism search for emet. What differentiates between the two? Why is the Kotzker Rebbe still Chassidut and the Vilna Gaon not Chassidut? Or the Torah coming from, it's not the Vilna Gaon himself. Why is one Chassidut and one not? There's a massive difference. We all have limitations in our intellectuality and our ability to understand things, each person on their own level. No one is limited in finding the truth. No one. No one can excuse themselves. You can excuse yourself if you don't understand calculus. You can excuse yourself if you can't read Latin. You can excuse yourself if you're not brilliant in the classics, if you don't understand sciences, whatever. You cannot ever, no one in this room can ever excuse themselves from the truth, from facing the truth, from confronting the truth, from dealing with the truth. No one has the right to do that. If you do that, you are giving up on life, real life, quality life. And that's where our emphasis has to be. As a people, we have to deal with other things. That's the Se'il Azazel. But the Chatat is me dealing with myself. I never write myself off because it's Yitanu Chata'im min ha'olam. Sin, aval lo chot'im, not sinners. It's what Rabbi Hirsch said when he was fighting the Reform movement. Very famous sentence he said, we fight the movement and not the people. You differentiate the people from the movement. A person is Tselem Elokim. The movement is an ideology. And the person is the most holy thing of all. It's for us, for you, all of you, and for me, to understand that on any given day, it doesn't matter if we think it's the end and we haven't done, even if a girl feels that she's sitting here now and she's wasted her time all year, you still have 4 weeks. 5 weeks. I was told I wrote it wrong. It's 5 weeks. You still have 5 weeks or 7 months. You still have time or Shanabet. There's always time. There's always time. There's always time to make things right. And sometimes I've waited a whole year. You know, when I felt that I didn't do something properly on an event in the calendar, I have to wait for the whole year. And I don't feel right until I get there the next year and I do it properly. And I do it again and I do it properly. We can do that. We can do that. But not only can we do it, it's probably the only thing I will tell you ever, except for Aliyah, that you must do. You have to do. And certainly not for me and not for your parents. You have to do it for yourselves. You have to do it for yourselves. Okay, thank you.